other studies now have shown that being around trees, being in nature for as little as a few minutes can actually reduce our blood pressure, help with anxiety and stress. And so again, these are things that, many of us may have inherently known for a while, but we're starting to really be able to quantify.
Three, two,
Welcome to Rooted in Care, where we amplify the voices of our clients and dive into how tree care plays an integral role in our everyday lives.
Whether you're familiar with A+ Tree or new to our community, we're here to bring the service industry together to explore the deep-rooted connection between people, trees, and the environment.
I'm Chantel Davis, Chief Revenue Officer at A+ Tree.
I'm Buddy Marshall, VP of Commercial Sales at A+.
We'll dig into what matters most to you. Your input shapes how tree care enhances the beauty of our communities while protecting our natural surroundings.
Let's get to the root of thoughtful tree care for your property, your city, your home.
So in today's episode, we're going to tell our homeowners about the aesthetics benefits of trees. Beautiful and healthy trees provide us with so much, all sorts of economic, environmental, and health benefits. And it really just goes beyond the good looks, right? We'll talk about some practical solutions for keeping your trees healthy. I'd love to introduce Patrick Anderson. Patrick is the Director of Research and Arborologist. Ooh, that's a handful. At Rainbow Ecoscience, he's a leader in plant healthcare research solutions and products. Patrick has over, I believe, 2 decades of experience in tree care, and we're excited to have him teach us all about plant healthcare.
Yeah, welcome, Patrick. Thank you so much for being on. So, Patrick, you have a very interesting title, Director of Arborologists. Don't believe I've ever heard that word before, arborologist. Can you tell me and the folks out there listening what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we say an arborologist is just a really good-looking arborist. That's a joke.
I love it.
It's a term that we invented at Rainbow Ecoscience, and actually Rainbow companies in general. So what an arborologist does, they are somebody that has a lot of experience in our industry, in arboriculture. But what we do is we travel around to our clients like A+, and train them, assist them, partner with them on plant health care. So if you have a tree that's looking, off, doesn't look right, we can come out and help with diagnostics on that and then help recommend the right treatment protocol to manage those trees. And so there are 5 of us throughout the country. And so just like that, we work with folks and make sure that they're making the proper diagnosis, using products responsibly and in a way that's going to be most effective for you, the tree, and the landscape.
That's exciting. I am ready to dive in. So would you mind telling us just a little more about Rainbow and the company and how you guys got started?
Absolutely. So Rainbow Tree Care actually was originally called Rainbow Elm Care, and it began in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area of Minnesota, believe it or not, back in the 70s. And our founder, this is right when a disease called Dutch elm disease was kind of making its way through that part of the country, which we can talk about more if you'd like, what that is. But it's a devastating disease, can kill elm trees. So our founder had a real affinity for trees, wanted to save them. There wasn't a lot of really good research protocols at the time for managing this disease. So that's how we got started, simply saving elm trees. So most companies start as a tree care company that does pruning and removal and then kind of segues over to plant health care. We began as a plant health care company that then segued into doing more traditional pruning and removal type work. So that's how we got started. That company is still one of the largest, if not the largest privately owned company in the United States, right there in Minneapolis, St. Paul. In the 90s, we moved over into what I do, and that's the product development and protocol development. So we go out and we research different pests and diseases and determine the best way to manage them, whether it be through using products to actually maybe kill the pest or arrest the disease, or through other cultural methods to help improve plant health.
We'll definitely get in later on all about like the elm, and you could tell us a story about that. So don't forget it. But I like to be a little personal. So I am actually curious. So I've been in the tree health or tree business for, I think, 8 months. And I dragged Buddy over. We come from the restoration world. So we're doing something a little bit different. But I always love to know, like, what drew you into the world of plant health care? And was there like a moment you knew that this was going to be your career?
Yeah. So, like many people who graduated from high school, I went to college not really knowing what I wanted to do. And then my junior year, I realized that what I was originally majoring in, I had no interest at all in doing full time. So, again, as you mentioned, I've been in the industry for over 20 years now. So back then you had a big book of all the classes that you could take. So I'm going through this book and I stumbled across forest science. Now, I grew up in the city of Philadelphia, didn't think that was even a thing. And then in forest science at Penn State, where I went, you had to pick a specialty. And so I found urban forestry. And that was like a defining moment, like taking care of trees in cities. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So I met with my advisor who told me, he's like, well, you're a junior now, you're a little bit behind. You're going to want to find an internship where you learn how to climb trees. And I thought, well, here I am. I found it. And then in just my coursework and then internships, learned about plant health care and all the different things that affect our urban and suburban trees and how they differ from how trees grow in the forest and how they really trees in our urban suburban interface really do need our help because they do get an array of things that can, again, reduce their health and vigor and reduce their life cycle or their lifetime in our landscapes over time. So that's what I've kind of done ever since.
Love it. I love it.
So I'm kind of curious. I know you've been doing this for 20 years. Is there a tree that you've recently seen that got kind of caught your eye? Just maybe a new species or something? And maybe why did that tree catch your eye? I know it's a weird question, but
Not a weird question at all.
oh, good.
And so almost hard to answer because so many trees catch my eye. Well, there's two that stand out. One was new to me, which I didn't know existed, and that was it was a variegated California incense cedar. California incense cedar is native to the Sierra Nevada mountain range. I've seen it in like Reno, Nevada. I've seen it. I was all over the Pacific Northwest just last week. Saw it planted a lot there as an amenity tree. Had never seen a variegated one before in my entire career. So that took me aback. I was really happy to see that. They're one of my favorite trees. And then again, last week I was at the Hoyt Arboretum, I believe it's called there in Portland. And they had a great, what they call a tricolored beech, which is it's a European beech, but it has a pink variegation instead of a yellow variegation. And it was just stunning.
That's so pretty. I'm actually thinking, I live in Northern California, Patrick. So I'm like an hour away from Reno. So I'm like, okay, what does that tree look like? And can I go see it? Because that's fantastic.
I'm actually in Seattle, Portland area. So that's interesting. I'll have to check out Hoyt.
So for today, we want to really talk about the various ways that healthy and beautiful trees help us beyond pretty assets. So one of the things that really, we think, gets people's attention and hopefully our listeners' attention is money, right? People listen
Sure.
when they hear the word money. And so I think it's very important resource, and studies have showed that trees can actually add value, right? Economic value. And so I'd love to kind of kick this off with asking you, how do trees impact property values in the residential and commercial spaces? Because I think that's going to get everybody to hit, yep, I'm going to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. So one, starting with, let's say, a residential home, there are a lot of stuff, and I'd say this is a growing field right now, is looking at some of the economic values trees bring. And it's been going on now for, again, probably close to 20 or so years, maybe even a little bit more. There's been several studies over the past couple of years from different organizations, things like the USDA, that show that a well-maintained property with mature trees can actually increase property values by 3%, but up to 15%, which may not sound like a lot, but when you're talking about, a property that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, 15%, that can really add to the value of that property. And then likewise, data would also show that if you have, let's say, the same type of house in a neighborhood, one with, maybe an underdeveloped or young landscape compared to one with a mature, well-maintained landscape, that house will actually sell faster. That property will sell faster than the other one. So there are direct, to your question, there are direct monetary benefits to just property value.
That's really helpful because not only for residential, but in the commercial space, especially with a lot of our multifamily, the most important thing for them is having occupancy, right? They always want to make sure they have occupancy. So if you're walking an apartment that has not a lot of trees, it's doesn't have a lot of shade, it doesn't look very appealing, but then across the street, you've got a beautiful property that's well maintained. Where are you really going to go? More than likely for me, I'd be like, oh, this one's prettier. I want to go. And I might spend the extra $50, right, to live there. So to your point, Patrick, I think it is so relevant. And I actually didn't know that on the residential side that it can be anywhere from 3 to 15%. So you talked about your love for kind of getting into this industry is because you grew up in Philadelphia, kind of the whole urban forestry. And so one of the things that I'm actually curious about as I've been in this industry is we hear that foot traffic actually increases in areas that there's trees and they'll spend more time there. So can you tell us a little bit about that and why people spend more time in areas that have trees?
Well, there's a couple reasons. Some are probably more subjective, and that, like you said, right? They're beautiful. You're just attracted to that, kind of environment, especially when you get into warm weather, seeking shade. I'm sure many of us have probably realized that walking around some of our, heavily urbanized areas where you see that people are starting to go to the other side of the street with shade. So that's one thing, of course. I think a big thing is. Another one goes to, again, I'm a research guy, right? I'm driven by some numbers, so not to be too boring, but there's other data that show that customers spend actually 9% to 12% more on products in tree-lined commercial districts compared to a non-tree-lined commercial district. So same thing. If you have two streets, one with trees, one without trees, and you're a business, people are more likely to spend more money on your business that has nice trees around it compared to the ones that don't have trees. Which of course is an irony because I'm sure we've all worked with people that say, hey, I need these trees pruned back or removed because of my signage. But maintaining trees, again, which you can maintain trees and infrastructure, can increase, just the wealth of your business there. So, why is that? A variety maybe of just human brain interaction with those types of things, but simple things like the cooling, the beauty of it all. We're attracted to that area.
So Patrick, we know that there are some benefits to trees, and you've named quite a few here, and trees benefit us in so many different ways. Maybe give us an example or two on how trees contribute to energy savings and cooling.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. The big part of that, of course, is they produce a lot of shade, right? And part of that, if you're just going back to our last kind of question there, is if you're underneath the canopy of a tree, you can feel that coolness, right? You can feel that drop in temperature, especially in some of our drier climates, like where you may be in California and things like that. Utah, these areas, right? You can really get a drastic amount of heat reduction just being in that shade. And so that also then leads into if you're air conditioning buildings, whether it be your home, whether it be in a homeowners association type scenario, whether it be in a commercial district, you're getting direct benefits right there because by cooling the building, the air conditioning doesn't have to run as often. So that, again, is a direct savings right there because you're not having to pay for the electricity to run that air conditioner. And of course, then there are cascading things there when we think about things like reducing the amount of pollution or carbon in the air. We're not burning as much fuel to create that energy that then cools our home. So there's like a downstream effect to those types of things as well.
That's something that people just don't know, and it's so important. And I think from an economic standpoint, those are such good reasons, right? Why we want to make sure that we are taking care of our trees. We don't just go straight to, oh, let's cut them down, right? Which is so important. So I know we talked a little about the economic side of it, but I want to switch over to what I actually think in today's day and age, people do really care about, which is the environment. And so could you talk to us a little about how the environment of a healthy tree and beautiful tree canopy can make a difference in our communities?
So one thing, thinking about it from a wildlife perspective, our habitat perspective, right? As we are, removing natural area to build infrastructure for human beings, which again, we need places to live and shop and eat and things. So that's not, inherently a bad thing. But, we are removing some of this habitat. So having a well-maintained large tree can provide habitat for numerous beneficial, insects. Believe it or not, there are beneficial fungi out there. So having those types of place for those things to live, and of course, songbirds. That's a big thing right there. Just having songbird population, some of these cute little mammals like squirrels popping around, which, some people might consider a nuisance. I think they're adorable. They can provide huge habitat for that. And a tree is like an ecosystem unto itself. So again, you have like these things are self-sustaining. So an oak tree is a perfect example. I forget what the exact number is, but an oak tree can be a host to numerous different caterpillar species that are not pests, but then things like our songbirds will feed on. So that's one thing from a habitat standpoint. Of course, the big thing probably for a lot of us is just the amount of pollution a tree can intercept. Carbon, of course, is a big thing that we talk about because they bind carbon up into the structure, right? The wood, the leaves, the stems, all that is made out of carbon. So it's binding up carbon, which of course is helping us out. But just all this particulate matter in our cities, burning again of gasoline and diesel and these types of things, trees intercept those things, as well as some other volatile, different particles out there that they intercept either on the leaves or absorb as they are growing. So they have a huge effect on just affecting air quality, which again, if you have folks that have asthma or other type of respiratory issues, being around trees can just help with those things as well. And then of course, helping with the amount of runoff. So if you're in an area that gets a lot of rain, and again, you have a lot of infrastructure around it, concrete, asphalt, things like that, trees can intercept a lot of that water and reduce the amount of runoff that's going into our streams and other aquifers that we need, of course, for drinking and things like that.
I think that's just such a good reminder, right? Of it's not only about the animals, but you talked about the environment, you talked about, the climate, getting rid of, smog and stuff like that. I grew up in LA, right? Smog and stuff is everywhere. But it's also good for your body, right? To go out and breathe and be next to trees. And so I think there was a lot impacted there. So I just wanted to kind of take a couple of those highlights so people can really understand how fantastic it is. And every time you say something good, I'm just going to say fun fact, Patrick, because I think it's fantastic.
I like it.
So one of the other things is as I've been learning about plant healthcare, tree healthcare, as I've come on board, one of the things that we heard is research starts to tell us that there's a relationship between like the tree cover and public health, right? Tree canopy. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what it's saying so we can educate our viewers on that?
Yeah. So it was a research paper that was published. It was in one of the Nordic countries, and it was probably sometime in the 90s. But they did this work where they showed they had patients that were recovering from surgery. One cohort of patients had a view of nature, and then the other set of patients had a view of like just a building, right? Nothing really pretty. They found the patients that have a view of nature, like trees, they recovered faster from the surgery, and they required less pain medication in recovery from the surgery. So that was kind of like, for me, that was like kind of the first thing I read about this. And so that set off this kind of like aha moment, right? Or just literally having a view of trees and being around trees can help us, from just a human health perspective. On top of that, which, might not having, or probably not all having surgeries every day, right? But so on top of that, other studies now have shown that being around trees, being in nature, looking at a tree, looking at nature for as little as a few minutes can actually reduce our blood pressure, help with anxiety and stress. And so again, these are things that, many of us may have inherently known for a while, but we're starting to really be able to quantify the fact that being in a tree-lined neighborhood, having access to a park, having a nice maintained backyard, has this kind of, again, cascading effect on human health. So the next time have a full day of meetings or getting stressed out about something, go for a walk and just sense it, right? See what it feels like to look at a tree or be out there. Trees are remarkable things.
We've talked a lot about beautiful trees, and I always say beauty is an eye of the beholder, right? But And I know beauty is subjective, but from your perspective and your professional opinion, what would you actually say makes a tree beautiful?
Gosh, I don't know what would be a perfect tree. Things that always catch my eye are I like a big tree that also has a really nice flower display. So here I live in North Carolina on the East Coast. We have these trees called tulip poplars. They can grow to be like 100 feet tall. They have a really unique leaf, and they produce these beautiful little flowers that look like little tulips. So that's a tree. That's really a big tree that has nice flowers is something I like. Unique fruit is something I like too. And so not necessarily the fruit we eat, but like things like acorns are something I like. And again, yeah, I like interesting bark, right? Part of the reason why I like that first tree I mentioned, that California incense cedar has really neat bark to me. So yeah, what makes a tree beautiful? It's
So Patrick, I have a tree in Arizona, beautiful, giant. It's probably 30 feet tall. It's an orange tree. It's beautiful. From a distance, it's beautiful. You get up on it, and inside, it's just not. It's coming. It has to come down. It's disease. So what are some signs of a truly healthy tree, and not just the ones that look green from a distance, like my orange tree? How can you really tell a tree is healthy?
the first thing you have to do to determine if a tree is healthy or not is know what the tree species is, right? And then maybe even sometimes what the variety is. We've discussed two trees here today that have variegation in the leaves. And so if you didn't know what that species or variety was, you can immediately think to yourself, something is wrong with this tree. So knowing what the plant is and then what's normal for the plant is where that begins. Now, things that you could think of from more general level would be the size of the leaves and the color of the leaves. That's where I start. So, you want your mature leaf size to be about normal for that species. You'd like it to be a darker green color, again, depending upon the tree and the species, of course. So size and color of leaf is one way to look at it. Trees, when they start going to that spiral decline, they often will begin to decline from the top down, believe it or not. So looking up into the canopy, noticing if there are small twigs that seem to be dead at the top of the tree, that would be an indication that the tree is in decline. If you have a nice full canopy, again, with none of that, that's telling you your tree is healthy. Density of the canopy. So again, having tree leaves throughout the entire canopy. So you have normal size leaves that are nice and dark green, and that is evenly distributed through the entire canopy, both from the tips as well as the interior. Those are good signs of a healthy tree. As you make your way down the tree, no signs of missing or loose bark. That would be indications that there are issues there. But if bark looks intact, nothing sunken in, no weeping from the tree, like oozing from the tree, these are all things that tell you if they're not there, you have a healthy tree. But if they are there, that might be the time to contact your local arborist.
Yeah, that's important, right? Contact
Yeah.
your local arborist,
Yeah.
because that's going to come up kind of with my next question, which is, when someone thinks their tree is dying or not in the healthiest state, what do you see as like the most common mistakes that can harm the trees in the long run that people do?
So one is I think there's some myths out there. I won't say in the industry, but in the homeowner type or the non-professional type, right? We all had some type of biology class probably, and we probably learned some things that were very general that might not necessarily apply to trees. But one thing is over pruning. That's a big one that I see. People will say, "Oh, my tree is diseased. I must have to prune the disease out, or I have to, do severe pruning to get rid of that bug." Well, keep in mind that trees produce energy through leaves. And so if you remove a lot of those leaves, the plant can't produce energy for itself, and you might actually kick it down further on that spiral of decline. That's probably a big one. We all know plants need water, of course. And one of the things that we run into often is people know plants need water, but then they only need so much water. And so we see a lot of people that overwater their plants. That's probably another big one that we see. Where people think they're doing good, and good water is good. We need water, but too much water can actually be detrimental to the plant. And then a few other things that we see people do that they might think are beneficial, but really aren't. We see often people like to use a lot of mulch around their trees. And of course, mulch is good when applied correctly. When you put a lot of mulch on that tree to where you're covering up that lower portion of the trunk that goes into the ground, and you're covering up that part of the tree that's flaring that should be above ground. Those are things that people will do that they think they're helping, but actually are hindering the plant.
We're learning about the importance of not only a beautiful tree, but a healthy tree, right? And so I like to dive into kind of for this portion and teach our listeners what they can do to help their trees. I think that's really important. So what are some common urban tree issues people should look out for?
Great question. I'd say probably the first one and probably the biggest one that is kind of then leading to a lot of other stress in the environment are issues with the soil around the tree, specifically soil compaction. And so what soil compaction is probably a lot what it sounds like, right? It's where activities happen around the soil the tree is growing in that reduces pore space in the soil. And so that, of course, by reducing pore space, you're not allowing water to enter the soil. And then oxygen, believe it or not, roots also need oxygen. And so that pore space allows oxygen in that soil. So when we're in a built environment like many of us are living in, and we have activity around the tree that compacts that soil, that can be limiting to roots, which then limits their ability to take up water and nutrients, which then, of course, limits their ability to produce energy for themselves actually up in the leaves. So that's probably one of the biggest things to be looking out for in that urban environment. Now, of course, that will lead to other things. And depending upon where you are, this is where certain common plant damaging pests and diseases might play a role. So those are other things to be looking out for. A lot of times we are planting like really the same species over and over and over again. So even though in many parts of the country we can grow a lot of different plant species, we're kind of just using the same ones over and over and over again. And they are often related to one type of pest or disease that can kind of begin to damage their health over time. So those are, again, things to bring in your arborist for to help diagnose.
So Patrick, we hear it all the time, right tree, right place. What are some low maintenance tree species that offer high aesthetic value?
Oh man, that's a great question. So again, I'm always going to put a caveat. It's going to depend upon many things, right? But our native oak trees are great options. Again, if you have enough room to grow them, of course. From all the things that we talked about, one, they're native out to that part of the world. They provide great ecosystem services, which is the term we use for these things like carbon sequestration and removing pollution and cooling and things like that. Those would be some great options for you.
Speaking, because we're predominantly on the West Coast,
Sure.
right now, we've had a lot of different speakers on, but one of the big thing that we're pushing, especially in California, is hardscape. It's really just not having the mulch, and it's more of like putting river rocks around your trees
Gotcha.
and doing other things of that sort. And what we're hearing is you need to do it right for fire protection, but it also puts a lot of stress on the tree. And we're getting a lot of people reaching out and they're saying, ooh, we did that, but our trees are not looking healthy. Like, what do we do? We're trying to comply, right? To be, fire smart, right? And have the right hardscape. But now our trees look like they're dying. And so I'd love to be able to kind of understand, when people do that, what are like the first signs that they should look for to be like, okay, our trees are dying. And then we'll kind of get into like, how do we address it?
So going back to our heat island effect, right? And things like this infrastructure can absorb heat. Same with river rock. River rock will absorb heat. And so again, our trees do need these cooling periods in the evening. So couple things. They absorb heat. Not only do they radiate heat in the evening when trees kind of want to be cooling off, but they also bring more heat into that soil, which then affects our roots. So now we have roots that are being damaged or maybe not growing where they want to be growing. And so from the standpoint of, roots' main function are to bring water and nutrients up into the plant. So by having those river rocks, which I understand are important because you have this defensible space you have to worry about, this is where we're seeing the damage, and this is where we're seeing the effects or the symptoms in the tree. And again, this can begin as leaf wilting. It can begin as what we call chlorosis, which is when the leaves start to turn yellow. Those are symptoms of that. Now, to try to help the tree out, there are things like, one, you can put in a sprinkler system to help just cool the soil off with water. And believe it or not, there are services that can be provided through A+ that help plants to be more resilient in these urban-suburban interfaces. Things like tree growth regulators, which actually help plants to be more resilient to heat and drought stress. So just one example of things that we can do to help these trees in these areas. Again, defensible space is important, obviously, but these are not necessarily where plants want to grow. So this is where we can intervene with some of these services to help these plants be more resilient in these areas.
I think that's so important, Patrick, because you said it right. We want to continue to have defensible space on the forefront, but now we're introducing a new concept that most people just don't know, which is we take our vitamins, right? As we get older or, our health changes, we are changing the environment of our trees. And so we need to make sure we're giving them the right nutrients and taking care of them. And so I think for us, it's really important to educate. And that's part of why, we love this podcast, Rooted in Care, is we want to make sure that we're educating clients, because I know for me, I wouldn't know what to do, right? If it's not talked about in the public every single day, you wouldn't know what to do. You're just like, hey, I'm complying, but what's happening? So that's really helpful. So I think one of the biggest things, as we talk about timing of treatment, so that's something that comes up a lot for us, especially at A+, is people think tree health, we call it tree health care. I know the industry calls it plant health care, but it created a lot of confusion because landscapers traditionally do plants, tree care does trees. So we're like, we're just going to call it tree health care. It's much easier. But one of the things that we're trying to educate our clients is they think you only can do tree health care certain times of the year. Like, oh, we can do it in spring once the rain stops. But we know it's important to do treatments year round. So could you talk us through, maybe at a high level, of what treatments do you recommend in winter, spring, summer, and fall?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question. And you're right. You hear that a lot, like, oh, I'll wait till spring or I'll wait till fall to do this treatment. But in reality, most of the things from an abiotic, that is the standpoint of helping plants be more resilient, a lot of these things we can do just about all year long. We mentioned things like a tree growth regulator that helps the plant be more resilient in these urban-suburban interfaces that they're growing in. That's something we can do all year long. Soil management, so that would be things like taking soil samples, amending the soil in different ways. As long as we have adequate soil moisture, we can be doing that all year long. Pruning is another one. So people, they have this, there's an old, myth that we can only prune in winter or only when the tree is dormant, which in some cases from a disease management standpoint is true, but the vast majority of trees we can essentially prune just about all year long as well, especially if it's things like we're trying to prune for infrastructure, things like that. And then the other things to consider are really around if we have a pest or disease, it's important to treat when that pest or disease is at a phase in its life that's going to be most susceptible to treatments. Some of my favorite things are these things called scale insects that essentially just sit and suck on your tree. We have some scale insects that are more susceptible in springtime or summertime, whereas we have other scale insects that are very closely related that are going to be more susceptible in the fall. So knowing what the pest is and where it is in its life cycle will dictate when we make applications. And again, depending upon that, it can be 12 months in some cases.
So Patrick, you mentioned tree growth regulators. Can you explain a little bit more about how they work and how they can improve a tree's beauty and lifespan?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about. So what a tree growth regulator is it's essentially, it's a product that you apply at a low volume right at the base of the tree. So it's very minimally invasive is the actual treatment itself, and it's applied to the soil. What it does is it essentially asks the plant, it alters the plant so it does not grow as large. And so what I mean by that is the twigs aren't growing as fast and the diameter of the plant isn't growing as fast. And that's why they call it a tree growth regulator, because it's asking the plant not to get as large as fast. It's still growing though. It's still producing the same amount of cells and leaves and all that. It's just not getting as large as fast. So benefit for trees growing around infrastructure. So, if you have signage, eaves, gutters, what have you, you can prune the tree, apply a plant growth regulator or a tree growth regulator, and it doesn't grow as fast back into that area that you're pruning from. Now, the side effect of that, usually we think of side effects as negative, but in this case, we have positive side effects, in as much as we see the plant produces more chlorophyll, which means the plant is greener. So after application, you have a greener plant, which we typically, going back to the idea of what is a beautiful plant, typically we think of green plants as being nicer looking, right? So that's one of the things that we can see. But we also see that it works to help the plant be more drought resistant. And by that, what it does is it helps the plant to respond faster to drought, to reduce drought symptoms in the leaves. So again, we don't see the type of wilting, we don't see the type of browning on leaves that we do in untreated plants in drought. It also helps it to be more disease resistant, because essentially what it's doing is it's reallocating resources that would go into above ground top growth and putting them back into these other kind of tree energy buckets. And so we see disease resistance, disease compounds actually increase in the plant to, again, keep them around for a longer period of time. So by having these things go on internally within the plant, and again, having the plant not get as large as fast, we can maintain these trees for a longer period of time in these difficult growing conditions. So yeah, they're pretty neat.
Can you share a real life example of a tree comeback after professional care?
Yes, I'll share with one that I am familiar with. So I mentioned I live in North Carolina. I live in the Charlotte metro area. The Charlotte metro area is a fast-growing area, like many areas that you are also dealing with, right? And so we had a mature oak tree. This was probably 30 to 40 inches in diameter. So again, measured from 4.5 feet above the ground. Big spreading canopy, 80 or so foot spread. And the property owner needed to put a brand new condo building within essentially the canopy of this tree. And so this tree is already growing again in this urban environment with some compacted soils. And so we only had so many really options to help this tree along, right? They were paving over more of the soil. So we could only do so much from a soil management standpoint. So we were able to use this tree growth regulator prior to the construction going on, giving it time to adapt. And now they've done the construction. Fast forward now, this is probably 13 years later. That tree is still standing, still looks green. We see no instance of this far of any canopy dieback. And so that's an instance where we used it proactively. We have another instance here where we did have a tree that was slowly declining back. In this case here, it was a sycamore tree. It was growing in western North Carolina around a river outfitter, like one of these places. And so slight dieback. We applied this, again, not too many options for us. We applied a tree growth regulator. We did the pruning. And again, fast forward again, probably about that same time period, that tree's still standing and looks great. So
that's great.
They have great applications.
I think Buddy framed it right. He said comeback story. As you're talking, I'm like, wouldn't that be a great show? Because I would watch it. I'd be like, did the tree make it? Okay, that makes me happy. Right. No, that was really helpful. So, we talked a lot of information. We covered a lot of things today. I think there was a lot of, I keep using the word fun facts, right, that you've shared for our viewers to listen to. But I am going to ask you to kind of summarize in 30 seconds. What's your top piece of advice for keeping trees both healthy and beautiful that you can share with everybody?
Yeah, great question. So, big thing is going to be doing things you can do around the tree to keep it healthy, right? So soil management, making sure that that root system is not being damaged or interfered with. That's going to probably be your biggest thing right there. And then again, contacting your local arborist and having them come out and take a look. And I'm not just saying that because this is a podcast put on by arborists, right? But as you may have heard here, there's been, several nuances that we've discussed, right? That, from a high level, we could talk about what it may be, but to have somebody come out and actually assess the tree and provide recommendations is really the best thing you can do for your trees and landscapes.
I love that, Patrick. So I laughed a little bit when you said it's put on by arborists. So we have a lot of fantastic arborists at A Plus Tree, but we specifically picked 2 non-arborists to host this because we wanted to have a non-biased view, right? As we are talking to people and educating our clients. So you get 2 very green newbies here. So everything that you're sharing in real time, we're going to be learning just like our listeners are learning. And that's really what we want to do, is educate people to make it easier for them to learn so they can apply it, right, to their everyday life. And so where can our listeners go to learn more or find help outside of just us, right? A Plus Tree. Where else can they go to learn?
Yeah, great question. So there's a few websites out there. Probably one of the best ones to go through it's called treesaregood.com. That is a website put together by our professional organization, the International Society of Arboriculture. And they have a lot of fact sheets on there. They have one sheet that's called the Homeowner's Guide to Managing Trees. So that's a great place to go and learn more. There's some other websites out there. Rainbow has a website that we are building out. So you can go to our website, of course, to learn about different pest and disease issues. But we have another educational website we're putting together called rootsacademy.com, and that's roots-academy.com, where we have different webinars and educational recordings that people could go and learn more about trees out there. And then the last one people could look at is there's another professional association in our industry called the Tree Care Industry Association, and they also have resources for property managers and homeowners and things like that. So those are some great websites to go to. And then again, your local extension agency is always a great place to go for questions as well.
Honestly, this was, for me, such an educational episode. Really, I love these kind of episodes so much, right? To absorb that. I think they're gonna, it's like, where do you go next, right? There's so much more that you leave us with. So it's great to have those resources to be able to, go and continue the education. And so the biggest thing we want to get out of it is we hope that our listeners now go outside, they look at our trees kind of in a new light, right? And just really, I know it's cliche, right? But appreciate all the ways that they can make the world a better place, right? So that was fantastic. For everybody listening, I just want to, just remember, keep your trees healthy so they can keep providing all the benefits. Schedule your annual tree assessment so you can have the most healthiest and beautiful trees possible. They are free assessments, so feel free to reach out to us. And then really, Patrick, I just appreciate you kind of just sharing all of this knowledge with us. I mean, I could see why when you went to college and took a class about it, why it became your passion for the last 20 years. There is so much there that we just don't talk about. And I'm really excited to educate all of our listeners on everything that you and your company is doing to really make sure that we are creating a beautiful place, not only for today, but for our future generations. So thank you so much, Patrick.
Yes,
Right on.
thank you, Patrick. We appreciate you coming on and educating us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Rooted in Care.
We have a fresh lineup of new episodes ready to drop. So tune in each week to hear people just like you share their experience and insights on how tree care impacts our daily lives. Subscribe to Rooted in Care. We're on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Tell us what you thought of this episode by leaving a review, commenting, or look us up on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok.
This podcast is a plussed up production created in collaboration with Chorus Studios. Stay rooted out there.